everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and it's a big day because today was the final day of Minnesota Vikings minicamp. And what a minicamp it was. There were 3 practices. There were probably about a grand total of maybe 25 full speed throws that we saw from JJ McCarthy, but there were a lot of press conferences, conversations, and other players emerging and popping up that we were able to see. So I would love to get your questions, your comments, but I'm actually trying to catch my breath because I just ran downstairs to time this out. So let me take a deep breath here. Okay, because I do have a lot to talk about, and I'm very excited to get to. I ended up writing down everything, every note that I took from minicamp, and I came up with 14 different things. So there's a lot to get to. So intersperse your questions, and I'll talk about all the different subjects and everything else. Edwin, yes. Hopefully, Colin Cowherd is watching. My thing with Colin Cowherd, by the way, I did not expect that my tweet was going to blow up of me just saying on Colin Cowherd's rant about JJ McCarthy that there's real reporters, not just myself, but at least a dozen of the rest of us that are watching these practices with JJ McCarthy. And if you want to know what he looks like, you could just ask. You could go on the show, but I don't even need to go on the show. Just ask me, or just ask Alec Lewis or Dane Mizutani or Ben Gessling or Andrew Kramer or Kevin Seifert or any number of other reporters who have actually been there at these practices, instead of saying that he's thrown 3 interceptions in 3 days when there were only actually 2 practices. That was my only thing with that tweet. I wasn't even trying to attack anybody or whatever else. And I am well aware of how the sports radio game works, which is where Colin Cowherd came up. And I was just telling a friend of mine that when I was starting in sports talk radio, I had program directors who pointed at Colin Cowherd and his very unique ability to latch on to a subject and sort of ride the take all the way through a season. And he's very, very good at it. Like, he's good at what he does. That's why he's on TV and has his show. And I respect him as one of the most successful sports talk personalities. But my thing is the correct information. And so when we're going to talk about what JJ McCarthy looks like at practice, I don't think that 2 interceptions at a minicamp practice is really a good amount of proof to start calling him a bust or a bad decision. And also, this comes from my perspective that people crushed me on this show in the comment sections and in every single podcast when I said, hey, if they brought back Darnold for a year, I think it wouldn't be that bad of an idea. And I got destroyed for that. So I'm not even against what he's saying about Sam Darnold and thinking the Vikings should have stuck with him. I'm not second guessing the Vikings decision now at this point that we've gotten down the road, but months ago when they were trying to make that decision, I would have been understanding of that perspective. It's just, to me, it's more about the actual facts of how JJ McCarthy has looked out on the practice field are right there. There's many people who have reported them. There's press conferences where people talk about how JJ McCarthy looked, including JJ himself today. But Kevin O'Connell, his head coach, his wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, his defensive players who have been playing against him here in these practices, and then all of the objective observers. And I saw my friend Judd Zolgan just wrote a story debunking the idea that JJ McCarthy doesn't have a strong arm. He most certainly does. But I guess I do understand, and I didn't mean to get down this road because I have 14 different things from minicamp that I want to get to. I understand when people say that he doesn't have a cheat code to him. I do understand that. And that was something when he was coming out of college where I thought the same kind of thing. Like, what is it that's going to put him up over the top versus some other quarterbacks in this league that have freakish physical skills? The freakish athleticism of somebody like Josh Allen, or the reason that Caleb Williams was drafted number 1 was because he could contort his body and still make strong throws to any area, anytime. He's lightning quick. You guys have seen that. Drake May was humongous and fast. Jaden Daniels, clearly, as you see, is an absolute freak show. And there isn't something that is really clear about McCarthy where you walk into the practice facility and watch 3 practice throws and go, wow, that's Jeff George's arm, or say, wow, he's faster than Lamar Jackson. But I also think that there's quarterbacks in the league who win a lot of football games that throw the ball really, really well and that run their offense really, really well and that lead their teams really, really well and win a lot of football games. And I was thinking about Justin Herbert when he first came out, where the talk was that he didn't really have a lot of touch on his football, and then he improved it. And then it was, well, can Justin Herbert really be a leader? And then you saw him last year lead them into the playoffs. And that's without even really a great team in Los Angeles. But we have seen quarterbacks with great teams around them. Jimmy Garoppolo is one of them. I think Jalen Hurts does have a cheat code in his running ability and his QB sneak ability and his clutch ability, his ability to never get rattled. But none of those things are Lamar Jackson, and none of those things are Josh Allen. And yet that's the quarterback who has been to the Super Bowl 2 of the last 3 years. There's a lot of very good quarterbacks in the league, and what usually propels their success is what they have around them, how well coached they are, then how well they execute, and whether they can make big plays at big times. And there is no quarterback better set up with all of that to master and lock into his offense, to operate a team as a leader. That's really what JJ McCarthy was known for. And then he does absolutely have the arm talent to fit balls into the windows that Kevin O'Connell needs him to. And we have seen that day after day after day, the velocity that McCarthy has on his ball, and it's still going to have to progress. There's no doubt about it. And he's still going to have to learn. There's no doubt about that. There are mistakes that happen. There are misreads that happen right now. And through training camp, we will have a much better sense of where JJ McCarthy is. But I think if you're trying to plant a flag right now and you're trying to be anti-McCarthy, and again, that's okay. That's like what TV talk hosts do. It's just not my job. That's someone else's job. My job is to give you 14 freaking things from Minicamp, like different jobs, different parts of media. My part of media reaches a very, very, very knowledgeable fan base about one specific team, where someone like who's on television, like Colin Cowherd with a big audience, he's trying to reach a lot of people with a broad opinion. But if you're going to be on the they should have kept Darnold anti-McCarthy thing, I think the focus should really be just on how well Darnold played last year and how risky it is, regardless of how much we've liked from JJ McCarthy, how risky it is to go with a quarterback that hasn't played before. I think that's the easier way to do it rather than trashing McCarthy based on what you saw in Michigan. And this is why on draft night, when the Vikings picked McCarthy, I said, I'm throwing out anything that I ever thought about him as a prospect, and I am only going to judge JJ McCarthy as a pro. And so far as a pro, all I've seen is improvement, leadership, work ethic, getting better and better all the time, the right attitude, a football junkie, and a guy with an absolute rocket for an arm. And we're going to see where this goes. It looks to me like this is a starting quarterback in the NFL that under the right circumstances will have a chance to compete for division titles and more into the future. But that's right now. There's a long way to go. And as I like to say sometimes, we still fight over quarterbacks. We still fight over Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert and all those different quarterbacks. So what are the odds that we never argue about JJ McCarthy? Probably pretty low. So quarterbacks are catnip in the sports talk radio world. I get it. I just think if you're going to talk about it with so much confidence, maybe ask somebody. Maybe just ask somebody who's there. That was my only point. Anyway, let's get to the 14. I think it's 14. You guys can count along with me. Things from training camp. And that begins with JJ McCarthy and his arm. McCarthy is good to go physically. He talked about that today, passing a physical. He said that his knee feels stronger than ever, has not noticed any issues whatsoever. And if there were any problems, we didn't see them when McCarthy was out there. He looked like he was moving fluidly, smoothly. There was no hitch in the giddy up. There was no tentativeness when driving into that back foot and letting it loose. He looked like a very confident thrower of the football, which is why I was asking him about it today. That's why I was asking KOC about it, because he just has looked like he's developed and grown quite a bit, and that he is just very confident throwing the football right now. Downfield, we've seen him hit on a few passes. Really, the ones that have impressed me the most are over the middle, the in-breaking routes, rocket throws into coverage, and there's a few that you can see on the Vikings website. If you go and watch their daily recaps, that you'll see some of the throws that I'm talking about over the middle of the field. I think to the outsides of the field, still work in progress. I think timing is still a work in progress for him. Again, minicamp phase. It's a little bit difficult to figure out, but as far as what does this guy look like on a football field? Does he look healthy? Does he look like he's throwing the ball like he was last year? Does he look like he's improving the touch and the accuracy? I think he's been a lot more accurate at this time of year than he was last year, which you could say is just because he knows what to do, but that's part of accuracy. Like, part of accuracy is knowing where to throw the ball. It's not just every quarterback in the NFL could stand 20 yards away from his receiver and whip it at him and play catch. But accuracy is anticipating guys out of breaks. It's throwing it before they get there. And that's when you have to know when they're going to get there and how the timing is going to work. And those things are continuing to progress, it seems to me. But the physical part was the most important part that we needed to see. And then just, did the operation work smoothly? Did it look like a practice is supposed to look like in the NFL? And I would say undoubtedly yes. And he's talking about focusing on layering throws. And this is something that I will be watching a lot for in training camp, because when McCarthy came out and he admitted this today and talked about it today, he said that he had one pitch, and that pitch was a fastball. And if you watch his college tape, that's absolutely true, that he dropped back and he whipped that ball as hard as he could at whatever receiver he was trying to go to. And where now you see there are checkdowns or underneath routes, things like that, or just a guy coming across, but you can't just fire it into like straight through somebody as if you're trying to throw a spear right through them. You're trying to fit it over some linebackers, in front of some safeties. And those are things that he needs to improve on and is still working on. But I think he's also taken huge steps from what we saw last year. I remember doing the podcasts after last year's OTAs and minicamp where we were saying, this is going to take some time, folks, and we're going to have to all be patient here. And that was one of the reasons we thought Darnold would probably start the season and beyond, was because McCarthy just wasn't even there as a thrower. I think he's much, much, much closer than he was before. And really, what impresses you the most about JJ McCarthy is it's now only a couple situations that we've seen, but we build the sample size of he needs to prove that he's going to put in the work to be the guy. And last year, I remember leading up to this, we talked a lot about JJ McCarthy between minicamp and training camp last year and how much he improved in that time. That was evidence that even Mark Wilf mentioned when we talked to him, and KOC had mentioned it repeated times. And then this year, he only gets back on the field in January. And this is where he said today that he's going to take some rest after this, but he gets back on the field and starts throwing in January. That's just a couple months ago. And by the time he's back on the field in late May and early June, really running things, he's back to the full weight that he needed to be. That was something I was very curious to see myself, because you just don't know with these guys, with young players, you just don't know how they're going to respond to difficult situations like that. Is he going to put the weight back on? Is he going to come back and look as confident in playing football? Is he going to take on this leadership role, which is the next takeaway from minicamp? I thought that what Harrison Phillips said about JJ McCarthy connecting with his teammates was really important. Now, he compared it to Josh Allen. He wasn't saying that JJ McCarthy is Josh Allen. Nobody is. But his point was that when you walk in the building, you walk out to practice and you see JJ McCarthy, and Phillips is saying inside the locker room, we see it outside. There is no doubt about whose franchise this is. It's JJ McCarthy's. You see him leading his teammates. You see him being the dude. And that's the kind of confidence that he had at Michigan. It's one of the reasons he was drafted so high, is because of his personality, because of how teammates connect with him. And Harrison Phillips used the example of just new players coming in and JJ McCarthy going up, introducing them himself, making those players feel welcome. And then you see the way he leads the offense out there. He's been in command so far. Yes, it comes along with all the caveats of, well, this is just mini camp, but it's all we have to work on. These are mini camp takeaways, folks. These are not 10-year projections of what JJ McCarthy is going to be. So Harrison Phillips' comment, I thought, I always listen for comments that are very specific, right? That to me was very specific. So his overall command and leadership in minicamp, I thought checked that box. Now, as far as I mentioned, what he was going to do, a little rest and recovery during this offseason. But another thing that would check a box here is that McCarthy said he was going to stay in Minnesota and he was going to work with his wide receivers, which of course might require him going somewhere else. But he did this last year where he didn't go to Cabo necessarily. He mentioned he's got a baby shower on the way. But as far as his time in between minicamp and training camp, that he plans to spend it here and to get extra time with his wide receivers leading up to training camp, which is the right thing to do if you can do it. And that leads me into one of the next takeaways, which is that Justin Jefferson and his attitude. Now, I don't ever think that Justin Jefferson had a bad attitude at any time for the entire time that I've covered him. He is what you think he is. Like when you see him on TV doing the gritty or the interviews where he's got a big smile and that sort of thing, it is as genuine as it gets for Justin Jefferson. Like that's who he is. Like people say the happy-go-lucky kind of personality, and that's who he is. But the last two times we spoke with him, once last week and once this week, I have sensed a different tone from Justin Jefferson. I think he realizes a few things. I mean, number one is that where this quarterback goes is where this franchise is going to go. And where this quarterback goes is where Justin Jefferson's going to take him. And he is really taking this leadership role as something that now feels very important to him. Whereas earlier in his career, I mean, being happy-go-lucky on the quieter side, he had said, maybe I was a little more shy, but now he's talking about trying to get Jordan Addison to do X, Y, and Z. Addison, get him to communicate more and to help Addison work out with him during this 5 or 6 week time before training camp, which is something we've never heard from Justin Jefferson before, that he was going to take a young wide receiver who, is a guy who's had some issues and could go either way. But look, if you follow Justin Jefferson, you're going to do good things normally. And so Jefferson talked about how important it was on, off the field, the way that he represents himself in the franchise and how important it is to be there for JJ McCarthy. Again, these are things that it's not that Jefferson wasn't any form of this before, but he seems to have put so much of this now on his shoulders of being that franchise player. And I think some of that has come along with the contract, that when the team gives you the contract, guys can go one way or the other. And sometimes a guy gets the contract and he's like, I made it. I'm the best, whatever. I'm just going to be me over here and whatever happens, happens. And in this instance, it seems that Jefferson has really put the onus on himself to command this franchise now and be that guy. And again, this is just not stuff we heard from him before in the past, but you're seeing somebody mature into their mid-20s, into their prime, into that type of role as a superstar. And it's really something to see. And I think that if you're talking about planting flags on JJ McCarthy and things like that, whether he's going to be a great quarterback or not, the one thing that you can point to for if you want to plant a flag that he is going to be good is this guy number 18, because I've always thought that he's a kingmaker at wide receiver just because he's open all the time and he can catch anything and he's as competitive as you will ever see. And he's also crazy smart at understanding defenses, coverages, opposing corners. He was talking about today how he's already banking things that Jeff Okudah does to him physically to try to work on those to defeat physical play. Like this is how Justin Jefferson works. But it seems like he is taking this other step intentionally to another level of leadership, which is a huge deal, I think, for the entire franchise and for the success chances for JJ McCarthy because he's always going to have the best receiver in the NFL in his corner. The other thing that was noticeable is that Jalen Nailor got bigger. We mentioned that and looked more comfortable as wide receiver 3. And the thing about Nailor getting bigger that I think it was maybe Jefferson mentioned or Kevin O'Connell. It was funny because Jefferson kind of laughed when we brought that up to him. Everybody noticed how much muscle Jalen Nailor put on. Clearly, he was putting in some effort in the offseason. But the one thing he mentioned is that, the wide receivers might have to hit some people. Trent Sherfield was kind of the let's throw this gritty wide receiver out there and have him smack into people. But you really need that to be one of your starting wide receivers because it was very obvious anytime Sherfield came on the field. All right, they're either handing off or running a play action here. And every once in a while, it worked and he was good, but you need that to be your starting wide receiver. You can't take a starting wide receiver off the field every single time that you're going to run the football and have Josh Oliver on the field every single time you're going to run the football. He's very good at blocking. It just can't be that way. You can't be that predictable. So I think that looks like it was part of Nailor. And the other thing is too, that, he's got to stay on the field. He's got to stay healthy. And there's an opportunity here for him to take a step forward. I think what it says is just how seriously he's taking that opportunity. And he knows that if he has a good year, free agency is going to come calling and deep threats are not easy to find. And he's already proven that he can be that guy. But my feeling from watching these OTAs and minicamp is that the top 3 are set. There is not a competition. Now, that doesn't mean there's not roles that can fit in, but there is not a competition for the first 3 spots. There is a great competition that is going to play out in front of us in training camp after that. And you can go see Kevin O'Connell's answer to my question about that. I think it was the last question he answered in the press conference. Or no, that was about the secondary. I guess it was in the middle of the press conference. But when I asked him about the wide receivers, he was talking about just how much is up for grabs there, that some players who have been here a few years have developed. I will continue to shout out Jashawn Jones as a guy who catches everything in these camps and in practices last year. Also, your Thayer Thomas, your Lucky Jackson, guys who have been developing, and every once in a while, one of those guys gets their big opportunity. But Ty Felton, I should mention, Ty Felton had the catch of the day, the catch of minicamp today at practice. It was from a throw from Sam Howell. So he has not been working with McCarthy, but he's been working with Sam Howell. And he was just running a deep route, and they had him double teamed, and Howell went for it anyway, just threw it up over the top. And Ty Felton really tracked that ball up over his shoulder and reached out and grabbed it. Not an easy play to make to even see the ball coming in double coverage. But I noticed when I was watching Ty Felton after they drafted him, just how well he can track the ball. I think when we talk about guys who are often yards after catch guys, we sort of assume that they can't double as a downfield wide receiver, but he mossed some people in college and he had a tremendous, tremendous catch today. A good sign for him. We just hadn't seen a lot over the first few days of OTAs and minicamp, but a really good sign for Ty Felton there. I think he's going to need a lot of work though. In and out of the routes is just not the same when you compare it to the starting guys. That's going to have to develop. But with the ball in his hands, I think maybe potentially in the kicking game, which we'll talk about, he could be something. But Rondale Moore will be coming back. He was working off to the side. They got Tim Jones in here, who's a special teamer, but has taken a lot of reps. So there's quite a few players in that wide receiver battle that should be really interesting. But as of right now, it's Jalen Nailor's job. There's nobody who's coming for it. Christian Darrisaw is back, and we asked Kevin O'Connell about him today. Now, O'Connell does not want to give a timeline, and that's fair. And maybe the other day we were a little over exuberant talking about week 1 for Christian Darrisaw, but just the sheer fact that he was back doing actual work in these practices is a very good sign for the chances of him coming back, at least really early in the season, that he is on schedule or maybe ahead of schedule. And I think O'Connell said something like, we can't have somebody who's that big and strong hitting our coaches. So we needed him hitting players as he was doing some of these drills and getting back. But O'Connell just said that they have been wildly impressed with Darrisaw's rehab and the way he's approached it. And the proof is in the fact that he was out here for minicamp, because if Darrisaw didn't want to, he could easily just wait until training camp and nobody would have blamed him. We did not expect to see him. We all walked out onto the practice field and went, 71? Wait, he's not supposed to be back already. So ahead of schedule, if you want to call it that, or on schedule, if you want to call it that, one way or the other, good signs for Christian Darrisaw being back. Now, on the other side of things, Will Fries was not practicing at any point during minicamp. That has not sounded like it's a concern from Kevin O'Connell, but we did get the sense earlier in the offseason that there was a chance he was going to be ready for OTAs and minicamp. It was a broken leg that he's coming off. That's not a very easy injury to rehab and to return from. So we expect, or at least from what O'Connell has said, we expect Will Fries to be back for training camp. And Rondale Moore has looked good from what I've seen from him just on the side. He looks like he's close to being ready to come back. He is not a very big guy, but I am really interested to see what he looks like out there, because when he was at his best for the Arizona Cardinals, Rondale Moore was a legitimate weapon for them. He would get the ball in his hands, could make plays, could go downfield a little bit. He sort of developed over a few years there. And he's also a guy who could make some noise in the return game, but the injuries, things fell apart in Arizona, just hasn't really worked out. He goes under that category of just spoiler for a later episode of this podcast where we'll talk about the most interesting players in training camp. I promise you Rondale Moore is going to end up on that list. All right, next thing here on my list, and I hope you guys are getting your questions in the chat so I can answer all questions and comments after, but I got a few more things to get to. On the defensive side, Dallas Turner looks bigger, looks stronger, and just from his usage right now, and I try not to go crazy with usage and things like that, because in training camp, that's a really good indicator of what's going to happen in the regular season. In minicamp, there's a lot of experimentation. Well, what does it look like over there for one rep? How does it feel to you over there? And if we're standing on the hill going, oh my gosh, they're going to use this guy in this formation or whatever, it's just maybe not an accurate representation. But it looked to me like Dallas Turner is going to be very Van Ginkel-like, where he is lining up in multiple spots. He was on the left side. He was on the right side. He was at linebacker sometimes. And I could see him playing a very dynamic role where someone's coming off and Dallas Turner's coming on, and maybe rotating on a certain play for Jonathan Grenard to give him a rest. But on another play, he's pass rushing up the middle on a third down or something like that. It looks to me like all that last year was trying to train him to prepare for this year, where he was going to take on a lot on his plate. That's how it looks at this moment. So Dallas Turner's role and how that develops, again, another thing that's going to go very high at the top of the list for training camp intrigue. But the fact that they haven't brought in any other edge rusher, any other backup edge rusher, and that battle will be something to watch as we go forward. But the fact that they haven't done anything else at that position, and he's out there with the first team moving all over the place, I think good signs there for at least how they feel at this moment about Dallas Turner. Also on the interior of the D-line, we saw a lot of Levi Drake Rodriguez, a lot of Jalen Redmond, and surprising a little bit to me, a lot of Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins is not a high draft pick and went to Georgia and got a handful of sacks, but didn't play a ton of football there. But everything that we've heard about him from Brian Flores is, and even from draft day, and then it's carried over when Flores was talking about him the other day, is intelligence, IQ, smart player. And these are the types of guys that Brian Flores has a history. He's a tweener. He's not quite an edge. He's not quite a DT, but you might even see them using 5D linemen and having somebody line up kind of over the tackle and between the tackle and guard who is 270 pounds and who isn't your traditional like defensive end and isn't your traditional defensive tackle, but is something in between that can work for them. And that could be Ingram Dawkins. They also might be just seeing how something looks. Levi Drake Rodriguez did get a shout out from Brian Flores, is getting bigger and having made improvements. That's somebody I think they're going to need, because you can't just run these three defensive tackles for the entire season. You have to have rotations, and Jalen Redmond, they're looking for to take another step there. But there's potential with this group to be one of the deeper D-line rotations in the entire league if even one of those guys click or two of those guys click. And at least from Levi Drake Rodriguez, you're seeing him get a ton of reps. We'll see what happens with Ingram Dawkins as we go forward. But at very least, you've got my attention, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. Speaking of Brian Flores, he talked pretty excitedly about the secondary. And the way he talked about it made me think. Now, they could do this tomorrow and we might have an emergency podcast. So who knows? But it made me think that these are all bets that Brian Flores himself is willing to make in the secondary. A bet on Theo Jackson, a bet on Mekhi Blackmon, a bet on Isaiah Rodgers, who I thought, if we're talking about somebody who looked really good out there, I thought Isaiah Rodgers looked really good. I mean, he stands out. It's hard to stand out with pure speed and movement skill in the NFL on a minicamp practice because everybody is so talented, but Isaiah Rodgers stands out. The fluidity in which the guy moves is kind of crazy, and I think he ran a sub 4.3, so the speed is out there, but he looked to me like his natural ability to stay with wide receivers, to move with wide receivers was really exceptional. So I can see why they're making these bets, but just listening to Flores talk about the thought behind them, why he liked these guys, why he's confident in Mekhi Blackmon coming back, it just seems like for right now that they're not going to be players in the Jalen Ramsey or Jair Alexander market, that they're not looking at this as, wow, we better go out and add a guy. What they, I think, would like to do, this is just based on Flores' comments, is wait and see. And if there are any issues in training camp and they're not happy with what they see, then there's always a corner who's out there that they could potentially go grab. And they've left themselves enough salary cap space to do that. Now, that might not be at that time a Jalen Ramsey, but we saw last year them make a late add of a Stephon Gilmore. Shaq Griffin is still out there. Rasul Douglas is still out there. Those guys tend to sit through training camp till somebody gets a corner injured and then they get a job. I think it's one of the easier positions to come in and learn for any team. So that looks like their plan. If I had to guess, I think that's their plan. I would be surprised at this moment if they do the Jalen Ramsey or Jair Alexander thing. And part of that too is the way that Kevin O'Connell talked about the secondary. I asked him about that, and he said that they would like Byron Murphy on the inside more often, which makes me think more nickel defense, more pure nickel defense with Rodgers and Blackmon on the outside. Now, this would be a good argument for getting Alexander or Ramsey, by the way, that you could plug one of those guys in. If it's Rodgers and Ramsey, and then the nickel is Byron Murphy, well, now you're cooking. I mean, you're talking about a really good cornerback group at that point. But, you know, I'll leave that rant for the other day when I was pounding the table and demanding that they go get Jalen Ramsey. But that comment also made me think about, well, wait a minute. What does that mean for Josh Metellus? What does that mean for Theo Jackson? What does that mean for the linebacking group if you're going to have Byron Murphy playing in the nickel more often? Does that mean that Josh Metellus plays deep safety and then occasionally maybe on early downs Theo Jackson's in, and it's not Theo Jackson just directly replacing Cam Bynum? That could be something. You know, maybe we'll end up seeing Josh Metellus play next to Harrison Smith a lot when they're facing three wide receivers, but then if they're facing bigger personnel, that's when Theo Jackson will come on the field and Metellus will move up into the box. I could see something like that playing out, because if they want more of Byron Murphy in the nickel, well, that means having two outside corners, which changes the calculus a little bit for the rest of the defense and could have kind of a trickle down there. So, but every time they talk about Byron Murphy, you just get the sense of how important it was for them to bring him back. I think O'Connell called it special, the communication that he has, and it's not sexy to talk about, but we've really seen it over the last few months, every time they've talked about it and how much money they spent on him, that they are seeing more beyond just, hey, is he a shutdown guy or not? Speaking of Josh Metellus, we also learned in training camp that it will not be an easy negotiation for Josh Metellus, because considering how beloved he is within the building, and look, Brian Flores was the one who showed up here and said, shouldn't we be playing Josh Metellus? And then he becomes this huge part of the defense that is multifaceted, that can play in the box, that can play nickel corner, that can play safety, and does all of them. But the issue is, well, how do you figure out what that's worth? And there's a few different ways of doing that. And one of them is to say, well, if you became a free agent today, what would your offers be? I have no idea what his offers would be if he became a free agent today. I truly don't. I really don't. I mean, I've tried to come up with at least one comparison for, even Justin Reed might be another one. I've used Trayvon Moehrig. Justin Reed might be another one for a guy that was a multiple in his role. But I think it is really tricky to look at other safeties and decide, where does this fit in? Because if I'm Metellus, I'm saying, hey, my guy Cam Bynum, who was just a deep safety, got 15 mil a year. I need to be getting paid more than 15 mil a year for this dynamic role. And the Vikings might be saying, yes, that's true. But are you going to find that dynamic role anywhere else except for right here? Plus, you can always franchise tag a player and things like that. That's another part of the calculus. I'm not saying I don't think it'll get done. I just think it will get tricky, and it already is tricky. And we saw Metellus once again today, not taking part in the 7-on-7s, but only doing the walkthrough period. I don't like to call that a hold in. I think that's unfair because he's doing stuff. He's out there. He's taking part in some of the key portions that are not super fun for us to watch because it's slow motion, but those walkthroughs are a big deal. So he's out there doing that. He's out there leading the team. It's not like he's just standing on the sideline with no helmet or something. He is participating, just not in the handful of 7-on-7 drills that would be faster where you could potentially turn an ankle or something like that. I don't really love the hold-in terminology for this instance because it's not like there's insubordination there, I think. It's more of just playing it safe while they're clearly negotiating a contract. So that one, it might leak into training camp. We'll have to see. Couple more things. One is the Vikings freaking love Josh Oliver. They signed Oliver to a contract extension, and there's not a lot more to say about it. They just love this guy. And we found out just how much they love this guy. We thought they loved this guy. They freaking love this guy. And I did an article on it if you want to check it out, purpleinsider.football. Go over there, and I included some film clips of different things that Josh Oliver can do that has stood out. He's an elite run blocker. I was watching him catch a pass today over the middle, and I was just wondering, is this the largest, fastest man to ever catch a pass of that degree of difficulty? I mean, he is so massive and so strong, but he can really catch the football. So he's a legitimate asset for this team. And he's one where if you know kind of thing, like if you really understand and dig down on this Vikings offense, you know what he can be for them. And what I discovered too in my research for my article was that when the Vikings ran to the edges, to the outside last year, Aaron Jones was over 5 yards a carry, but he was only about 4 yards a carry when he was running up the middle. Now that makes a lot of sense, right? Dalton Reisner, Blake Brandel. It's not like Garrett Bradbury was really moving the needle a ton last year in that interior, but when you ran to the edges where Josh Oliver was, they were succeeding in the run game. So now if you add the rest of the pieces to the puzzle, this could be a very big weapon for them. So the Vikings love Josh Oliver. That's a big takeaway. Two more. Who's kicking and punting returning? Will be a very interesting question to find out in the preseason games. It might be one of the best things that we see in the preseason games is just who's back there. And Matt Daniels, it didn't sound like from Matt Daniels' perspective that he had talked KOC into using Isaiah Rodgers just yet. From what I watched, and we're talking about they're not getting tackled or anything like that, but the guy who's the fastest is Isaiah Rodgers. He looks like lightning quick when he catches that football. But do you really want your starting outside corner returning kicks? I don't think so. So who else is going to do it? Is it going to be wide receiver 3, Jalen Naylor, kicks, punts? Will it be Rondale Moore? Does Ty Chandler stay on this football team by just being able to return kicks? I think that would make sense. And Daniels also mentioned that the other kick returner was one of the guys who got hurt the most last year. Not the guy getting the ball, but the other one that's back there. And So who do you put back there that you're willing to get hurt? Is that Ty Chandler for like a kick returner 2 role? Some intrigue there in the punt returning job up for grabs. Silas Bolden is a name to continue to watch. Undersized, very good punt returner in college, made some plays as a wide receiver at Oregon State, a little less so at Texas, but he has stood out to me as someone who is able to catch the ball. And we saw a couple other guys, they got hit in the dome on punts during minicamp, which is always my favorite. It's so hard to catch a punt. That thing is coming in at crazy angles, and you see guys doing it for the first time. I got it. And then they get hit in the helmet. It looks like they've never played football before. That's how hard that is. So you got to be careful with what you do there. And the last one, and I know you guys have been dying for this update, KOC seems pleased with his backup quarterbacks. Yes, that's right. He seems pleased. And he mentioned today that, Sam Howell, some of his throws that did have touch on them throughout this camp, which I thought he looked fine throwing the football during mini camp, maybe a little shoddy in OTAs, but again, you're just first starting to learn these things. And it looked like as he learned more and more that he was getting more comfortable. Now, some decisions you'd probably question, but you'd probably question them for any quarterback in minicamp. Seemed to me like Sam Howell did fine in this minicamp and that KOC was comfortable with him. And he was talking about leaning into the experience that he has as a starter. And the guy that I've brought up to you, kind folks, multiple times, but I'm going to say it again, Max Brosmer. Max Brosmer looked good in minicamp to me and then was shouted out by KOC today. And I think he said he was either the smartest or the farthest along. I'd have to go back and look at the quote. I believe it was the smartest guy that he's had in that role coming right out of college and then starting to learn. And it shows. He knows where to throw the football, and it comes out with some decent enough velocity to potentially be an NFL backup quarterback. The Gophers the Gopher starter, I don't think he could be QB2. I don't think that's an actual battle. Could he be QB3? I mean, I could see it. I think Brosmer has done a really good job. So there you go. 14 different things from minicamp. Now your questions, your thoughts, your feelings. I'm going to have to scroll back up here and get all of your reactions to all the different stuff that I have thrown out there, including the opening about Colin Cowherd. So we'll see what you guys have to say. But an interesting camp, though. An interesting camp. It's every year we try to just take as much as we possibly can out of all of this. There has only been one year that I've ever covered the team that in minicamp we came out and said the vibe was bad. The vibes were very good. And it seemed like everybody was pleased with how much work they got done, with how smoothly the practices went. And I also think you could tell that the veteran players are looking around and going, we got a lot of really good players here. And there are more good players and less questions than this team has had at any point in minicamp that I can remember outside of probably 2017 was the only other year where we went into minicamp and said, yeah, this team is really stacked. But even then we still had some, I think, questions like Trey Waynes hadn't really emerged yet. We were still talking about, is Terrence Newman really going to be the nickel corner? Stuff like that. The offensive line, fewer questions this year than even going back then. This is a strong roster and they sense it. And coming off last year, even Jefferson talked about how it is hard because he's aware that there are expectations for this team based on all the talent they have. But that's so far away from right now to start saying, well, we've got to win in the playoffs, but we're not even close to week one yet. There is a very clear feeling from the veteran players on this team. They know how much is here. They know what the expectations are. This is no longer let's prove the world wrong, guys. Like that's just not who they are now. And that comes along with a different attitude from the veteran players. And I felt like you saw that from them out in this minicamp. Okay, I shot you 99, probably the least interesting position right now, but how has Will Reichard looked? He was shaky when he returned from his injury. Should we still be worried? Well, yeah, I mean, I have to say the normal, it's minicamp, so I can't really tell. Last year in minicamp, he looked like the best kicker I've ever seen in my life. And he looked great. I mean, he looked totally fine to me. Made every kick that I saw. Maybe there was one that I didn't catch. Because normally what's happened is we're on our hill and then they tell us, hey guys, this is the last period of practice. So we start walking over to the other side where the press conferences are as Will Reichert is doing his kicks. So I'm trying to watch, but you're also walking at the same time. But looked fine to me. He was kicking from a ways out. They were going in, and the whole rest of the time they're just off to the side kicking. I think there should be confidence in Will Reichert because he really only had some struggles after he came back from that injury. And Matt Daniels did talk about this. He basically said, because somebody asked him about Reichert, maybe it was me, just about like when you go through the pre-draft process, there's so much kicking. There's kicking in college and his team went deep in the playoffs. Then there's your pro day kicking, and then there's the combine or whatever. I don't know if he went to the combine or not, but there's like a lot of things that you're doing, individual workouts and stuff like that, that he felt like rest was a factor, or a lack of rest was a factor in why Will Reichert got hurt last year. And they're trying to make sure that he doesn't have that issue this time around. I think that we saw that last year, that Reichert, I think, pushed himself back too early. We know because he told Mark Craig at the Star Tribune that he did not tell them when he wasn't feeling 100%. So I think there's a little bit, sometimes there could be too much dog in you. Sometimes you could be too competitive. There is that. It sounds like they've got to rein him in a little bit, and that's what they've been doing. But looked fine to me, and I expect that they're going to have a good kicker this year based on what we saw last year. Hamza says, Matt, want to get your thoughts since you cover the team, but every time I hear JJ speak to the media, I come across blown away by him. He comes across as honest, genuine, and intelligent for his age. So this is a key point about JJ McCarthy when we talk about like the cheat code. When we think about cheat code quarterbacks, we think about the biggest, the strongest arms, which again, he has a strong arm. And we think about the fastest, the guys who can run. Now, you would oftentimes trade some intangible stuff for somebody who has those type of things. And then when it all comes together, you get Lamar and Josh and Pat, and that's the best of the best. But there are other parts to this game of playing quarterback, and communicating is one of them. When you hear him speak, what you're hearing is someone with a very natural ability to connect with people. And I think you hear that there. And you're also talking about a very good communicator. So when Kevin O'Connell and Josh McCown and JJ McCarthy are working through things, there's not going to be any barriers there of him being able to communicate. When he needs to talk to Jefferson, Addison, Naylor, Hawkinson about what he needs at quarterback, and Ryan Kelly, there's not a barrier there. And I think that's one of KOC's sort of little cheat codes in football, is great communication, because this is the same way in basketball. What do they say about great defenders? They communicate really well. Great teammates, they communicate really well. And you have a center who has been through this, and he needs to be able to work with JJ McCarthy. I think that's part of his reason that he was drafted so highly, is that anybody who sat down with him went, okay. And I remember saying to somebody with the Vikings last year when we did our first couple press conferences with him, I was like, see 21 going on 29. Like, it just seemed like he had done this. But remember, he was at IMG. He was at Michigan. Like, this is not a guy who, when there's a camera in front of him, is going to freak out. Like, he has been this guy. He's wanted to be this guy, the leader of a franchise, QB1. Like, this has been his goal. And so I'm not shocked that he's like that, but I also think it's one of the things that makes him stand out and makes him unique, is that there aren't too many quarterbacks of his age that I've run across that do have that type of natural confidence in front of people. So yeah, no, I think that's a good observation. First name, last name says, whose burner are you? Pie chart of likelihood based on early impressions. Backup quarterback is Howell, Rippon, Brosmer, or someone not on the team. Well, right now I would go, as far as just the backup quarterback, right now it's 90% Sam Howell and 3.5% for the rest of the guys to get to 100. And someone not that's right. That's right. Isn't it 90%? And then everybody else gets 3.33 continuous for Brosmer, Rippon, and then someone not on the team. That's right now. If Sam Howell struggles, it will be someone else not on the team. It's not going to be Brett Rippon or Max Brosmer. Those guys will not be QB2. And that's me being really impressed with Max Brosmer. But you're not going to take someone right out of college and be like, yeah, if our starting quarterback goes down, you have to start 6 games. Go ahead, kid. You've never played before, but there you go. You need someone with experience for this backup job. And there's nothing I've seen that would talk me off of Sam Howell right now. It feels very much like he's going to be the backup. He's going to be the guy. But this pie chart can change in an instant if he has 3, 4, 5 bad practices in a row and then doesn't play well in preseason and was not gelling with the team or with the coaching or whatever, then you could be talking about someone else. But as of right now, I think it's the heavy favorite that he is going to be the backup quarterback. Ham Darnold is dead, says, I'm just going to go with Ham Darnold for that, says Isaiah Rodgers is going to be this year's Andrew Van Ginkel signing. Oh, that's an interesting correlation there or connection there because Andrew Van Ginkel was really underappreciated. The difference to me is that Andrew Van Ginkel was as good as he was last year in Miami, but he didn't get quite as many opportunities to rush the passer, I think, or at least in a situation like this with so many moving parts. Didn't play as many snaps in Miami either, which racks up counting stats when you're on the field more often. But if you go and look at some of the PFF grades that Andrew Van Ginkel put up, I remember when he signed and I went, guys, they just signed a great player. It doesn't matter if you haven't heard of him. He's really good. And I know he's got a funny name, but like he's really good. And, that turned out to be the case. They played him more and you really saw the true value of Van Ginkel. With Isaiah Rodgers, I like what I see in small sample sizes from his data. I think it's an 86 quarterback rating when opponents have targeted him. He's always been above average in coverage. So making that connection is right, where it's an under the radar, hasn't had as many snaps. But I think Van Ginkel was already one of the better players at his position and just didn't get a lot of love because he was in Miami. They're more about, the offense, the coach, Tyreek Hill, where Isaiah Rodgers, there might be a little bit lower of a ceiling than there is for Van Ginkel. And there is a signal in the fact that he wasn't playing anything more than a rotational player. But that is the type of guy that Brian Flores is very, very good at identifying who is on the rise. And he could be. I like that connection. I think I'm just saying that Van Ginkel was a little more proven than Rodgers is, but I get where you're coming from, and I like that comparison. Majal, hopefully I'm saying that right, says over the cap has Metellus at about 5 per year in the free market. Well, that's exactly the point that I'm getting at is nobody knows what to do with Josh Metellus. There's no dang way he's a $5 million player when he plays this many snaps, this many different positions, is one of their best tacklers. He causes fumbles. He gets interceptions. He makes plays and can even play on special teams if you need him to. I mean, he is a really valuable player. He's a captain. He's a leader. He's one of the smartest players on the team. Like there's more to this than just, hey, here's his tackle numbers and his interception numbers, and this is what he's worth. Because if he was a deep safety and played just as a deep safety and didn't get very many interceptions, well, yeah, he's going to be worth $5 million. But we know better than that. We know that this has to be adjusted for a half linebacker, half safety. And I just don't know how. Because I was thinking more along the lines of $15 to $17 million. And I know prices seem crazy high these days, but you have to think about this is going into the future. This is adjusting for a salary cap that's going to go up and basing that on what other guys in free agency got. So Mora gets like 17 per year. So what if this is like 15 and a half? What if this is like 16 into the future? But they might not want to be going there. They might want him more around 10, 12, 14 or less than that based on saying, hey, we could find somebody else to do this role as they always have. And they've developed him, but they don't want to say that. And he doesn't want to go anywhere else. Both sides know they want to be with each other. They just got to figure out exactly how. Kurt says if Hockenson doesn't put up crazy numbers this year, will he be a Viking in 2026? Well, it depends on what you mean by crazy numbers. If TJ Hockenson has, let's say, 73 catches for 812 yards and 5 touchdowns, is he going to be a Viking in 2026? Oh, yeah, absolutely, he will be. And I haven't looked at his contract lately of when you can get out of that and so forth. I think the only way he's not a Minnesota Viking is if it went really bad somehow. If there was another major injury, if him and JJ McCarthy just did not work out at all together and they couldn't figure out their chemistry or something. But when they sign Oliver, there's this a little bit of natural, like, oh, does this mean something about Hockenson? And the answer is no, because 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends is a cheat code in the NFL. And the Vikings want to use it more. And it's a cheat code because teams want to play nickel. They don't have big linebackers. You want to be able to run play action out of that. You want to be able to hand off to the edges like I was talking about. And Hockenson is more of a wide receiver. He can run block, but he's more of a wide receiver. And he's kind of like an underneath. He's almost like having a traditional slot receiver that they don't really have on this roster. But there's a lot of footballs to go around. I mean, when you talk about the numbers, that's another part that's hard because you start out a season with 100 plus going to Justin Jefferson. So out of 400 whatever completions, 20+% go to one guy. So then you have to subtract from there. I don't know he's going to put up the same numbers he did with Kirk, who really trusted him. Now that they have a Jalen Naylor, there's more of a wide receiver 3 there than there was before. But I mean, I think he's going to be on this team for multiple years. I really was just not down on him last year the way that some people were. It felt to me like Sam Darnold didn't look to him as much as he did Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison down the field. It's not like he didn't catch the ball when it came his way. It's not like he had a bunch of drops or anything. That's a little bit more fantasy brain for me, like fantasy football brain. And he was slowly working back into the lineup for a while there. But I'm not down on Hockenson. I think actually with McCarthy, he could be really important. John, thank you so much for the super chat. Shout out to you. Really appreciate that. Says, I don't understand the investment in tight ends, particularly given what was spent on the offensive line. Not saying he isn't good, but he costs more than number 2. I assume you mean tight end there for if you're talking about Josh Oliver. So the thing about investing in someone like Josh Oliver is we're going to have to adjust our brains because a lot of us lived in this world, including me, in past years where every move and every dollar figure needed to be scrutinized. It needed to be like, is this the right way to allocate these dollars? We don't live there anymore because JJ McCarthy is taking up $5 million and not $50 million. If JJ McCarthy was taking up $50 million, then I would be with you and say, okay, why are you spending so much on a tight end too, just because you like how he blocks and catches 20 passes a year? But in this instance, this is the time where you spend the extra dollar to get ever so slightly more. Think about it like buying a seat upgrade into Comfort Plus on a flight. So if you are not doing so good financially and you're pinching pennies, you are sitting in the very back of that flight. But if you're doing pretty well for yourself and you've got the extra few bucks to spend, then you go up to Comfort Plus and you're like, oh, this is good. I like this. And that's basically signing Josh Oliver. Yes, you could have Ben Urasek or Gavin Bartholomew be your backup tight end, but it's not as good as Josh Oliver. And when you're trying to win the Super Bowl and you're in a position to do it, every single thing matters. So if Hockenson gets hurt again, you have a very clear guy who can come in and play. If that you were not keeping Josh Oliver, then you don't. And if something goes wrong with Hockenson down the road and they do have to cut him or they do have to trade him, it's possible. You never know where it's going to go. They've got another option who they really believe in. As far as like spending on the O-line, like that's the point. They can spend wherever they want. They can spend on the O-line, spend on the D-line. And I know that eventually that runs out, but not really in this window where you're going to also pull every lever and push every button to make cap space in the future to make sure you're keeping this window with JJ McCarthy on the rookie contract open. They know it. It's what we talked about the other day with Jeremy Fowler talking about the 3-year window. We've arrived, folks, at that moment. And it's the thing we've been talking about for a long time. And also, Oliver does so many things. I just implore people, if you like film, if you like the all 22, like go watch Josh Oliver. I mean, you can see it when you watch him. The run blocking is exceptional. He catches passes when you throw it to him. I mean, the play he made at the end of the Atlanta game where he catches a pass, kind of slams on the brakes and takes off for 20 more yards. He's an interesting cat. He's an interesting cat. If I could only keep one tight end, Kurt says, would it be Hockenson or Oliver? I mean, Hockenson's a Pro Bowler and is one of the best wide receiving tight ends in the league. That's always going to have more value. If we're talking about their contracts, but this is the point. We're not talking about their contracts at this point. It doesn't matter if Josh Oliver is overpaid. It just doesn't matter anymore. That's why they spent all the money the way that they did. And that's why I like a move like that, because in the past, I definitely would have said, I don't know, man, that doesn't really seem like that's the best way to spend it, but we're just not in that space now. So yeah, I mean, I would go with the Pro Bowl wide receiving tight end because that's got more value than Josh Oliver. But he's one of those guys that, you go into the playoffs and you're trying to run the football and you're going to need somebody like that. They were so bad in the interior that it didn't have as much of an impact, but it still did, because when they ran to the outside, they were successful last year. So they could at least have a competent running game for most of the year. I don't know that they would have if they didn't have Josh Oliver, or it would have been as good running to the edges. Others who are astute at quarterback play have said that Sam Howell looked pretty bad. I tend to believe that a lot more than he looks good. Noodle arm, John says. Yeah, so here's the problem. I don't think he has a noodle arm. I think that that's unfair. He started real games. You can go watch them. You can see what he looked like in real games. So if you want, you can. I have not been too concerned about the backup quarterback position just in general. Whoever they have there, just make sure it's somebody who could win 3 games if your starter's out for 6. And Sam Howell probably can. I don't agree with noodle arm. I mean, it's not JJ McCarthy's, but it's an arm that's played in the NFL and won real NFL games and had a stretch during that season where he started that was pretty good. But if you're expecting him to be a starter, well, I got bad news for you that no quarterback that's a backup in the NFL is a starter, except for maybe the Giants. If Jackson Dart is good, Russell Wilson is like sort of a starter, but the Browns have no starter at all. But yeah, he's a backup quarterback. But I don't think that calling it a noodle arm is fair. It's not an above average NFL arm. He's not throwing rockets. His minicamp was solid. It was fine. His first OTA practice that we saw didn't go very well, but that's the foolishness of trying to make so much out of this stuff. If you're trying to make a lot out of one OTA or one minicamp practice based on a handful of throws, I just can't say enough how dumb that is. It's just not logical at all, because there's so little that we see. But I'm just not going to spend any time arguing over QB2. It's not worth it. People like it, but it's not worth it. There's just the differences between QB2s are almost nothing. If it's your favorite backup versus your least favorite backup, you know what the difference is? Almost nothing. You don't want them to play. Rayaway says, is anyone else concerned with how many times the Vikings media has had to try and convince us that JJ has a strong arm? So the thing is, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm telling you what I saw with my eyeballs standing on the sideline of a practice for the last 2 years watching JJ McCarthy, or last year minicamp and training camp, and now. And I am telling you, as a matter of fact, of somebody who has now covered this team going into 10 years, I'm pretty sure I know what an arm looks like. What did I say about Sam Darnold last year, right? And I know, yeah, everybody knew Darnold had a good arm, but I've watched a lot of practices. I've watched a lot of quarterbacks throw footballs. I know what it looks like. It's not trying to convince you of anything. It's a fact. Every single person who has watched this guy throw the ball, and there's a video of it if you want to go see it on Vikings.com, has seen the velocity. Oh, and by the way, at the NFL Combine, he threw like 61 miles an hour or whatever. I mean, it's just a fact of the matter that the guy has a strong enough arm. It isn't some sort of it's the Minnesota media cabal trying to convince lie to the world. There's dozens of us out at practice all seeing the same things, my dude. So it's just a reality. Does that mean that it's a perfect arm? Does that mean it's Josh Allen? Does that mean it's Jeff George or Jamarcus Russell or whatever your favorite very strong armed guy is? No. Is he as accurate as Darnold or Sam Bradford, who to me is the best thrower of the football I have ever seen in my entire life? No. Sam Bradford was the best, hands down. Darnold's really good, but as far as accuracy, pure throwing, whoa, that's different level from where JJ McCarthy is. But as far as velocity goes, the start of the football throw-in to how fast it gets there, it's very fast. Does that mean he's going to be perfect at dropping the ball in 25 yards down the field? I don't know. That's what he has to work on. But the reason is because national media people keep going back to scouting reports that were from 2 years ago that say he doesn't have a strong arm. And McCarthy was asked about it today, and he said, look, it's probably because I don't have a big frame, and also because he threw with all of his might all the time in college, and he admits this. And when you, and there's some of it, I watched it, I saw him at Michigan, and sometimes I laughed because he would wind up like he was throwing from the outfield to throw like a 15-yard in route. It was unnecessary, and he's learning that. He's learning those details. I also think that throwing to the outsides, sometimes the ball would sail on him, and throwing deep, he didn't have trajectories right. And if you don't have the trajectory right, it's not going to drop in beautifully like NFL films. It will often kind of just die out if the trajectory is wrong. Those are details. Those are not physical arm strength. Those are details of how you learn to play the position and throw footballs in real games. This isn't some sort of circus where you're trying to put up the biggest number of how hard you can throw it. There's a lot of details that have to be learned, but as a pure matter of fact, there were people who scouted him off of whatever, I don't know, all 22 or whatever, not, I guess, in person. And it was different then, but that was also a long time ago now. I mean, how much did you grow when you were from 20 to age 22? I mean, for me, probably the wrong way. Probably put on a lot of weight the wrong way. But for a pro athlete, there's a lot of growth time in there. And so that's what it really is. I don't even know how it's any sort of argument. When a dozen people are out there watching the same thing and you're like, oh, it's must be the media covering for JJ McCarthy or something. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Anyway, moving on. It's so odd that, and I saw Judd wrote about it too. It's so odd that it's a debate. It's really, there's no debate. The guy has a very, very strong arm. It's just a fact. What he does with it will decide whether he succeeds or not. But it's there enough. There's a pro day that's on video. There's a combine that's on video. There's a velocity number. There's dozens of practices. There's practices that you can see from fans in the stands taking videos of it. There's a preseason game. Like, what are we talking about here? This is the most like 2025 media thing I've ever heard. Is there is a bleep ton of evidence of something and reporters there on the ground telling you the truth about it, and somebody from the outside says, no, I don't believe it. And then people are like, well, that guy must be right. Okay. Preston says, so excited about this upcoming season because I want to see what JJ becomes a quarterback, not concerned with wins and losses, but just if he's any good or not. Totally disagree. You and I could not be farther away where we're at than that. For me, and you can feel that way if you like, I'm not being critical of you, but how we feel, I am not close to that. If he had been drafted to this team 3 years ago, then I would have said, oh, of course, I totally agree. Even last year, we were like, if the roster makes progress and McCarthy gets in, before he got hurt, Okay. And when Darnold was going to be the starter and McCarthy got hurt, it was sort of, let's just see what happens, guys. Who knows? Like, we got to go through this season. So let's do it together and have a good time. And then they end up with 14 wins. And we're like, wow, this is crazy. But this is not that year with the spending on the roster, with the veteran players, with the stars. JJ McCarthy has to produce, he has to win. And it's year two. It's not year one. He's not a rookie. There have been plenty of quarterbacks in the NFL who are in the playoffs, who win playoff games. Jaden Daniels was in the NFC Championship. In year three, Jalen Hurts is in the Super Bowl. In year two, Patrick Mahomes is in the AFC Championship. You got to go win. Like, that's their whole timeline. The whole front office's plan for this roster is built around here and now. Win. Don't just find out what he, and by the way, the other thing is too, that if you find out what he is and it's good, you're going to win because the rest of the roster is really good. So if you're just watching to hope that McCarthy is good, well, you're kind of then hoping for them to win a lot because it's not like he can be good and the team not win. If he's good, they're going to win. David says, I don't get the Hockenson hate. He's going to be a beast this year. Darnold sucked at over the middle passing and short stuff. So by the numbers, Darnold was okay by the end of the year. They just didn't do it a lot. So if you check the numbers, Darnold's short passing, when he did it, was successful. But he was something like 16th in the league in the percentage of passes that he threw between 1 and 10 yards. And they didn't throw behind the line of scrimmage very much. And I just think in general last year, with Hockenson having to show up in the middle of the season, it was a little bit harder to get on the same page with him for Sam Darnold. Because now I know that happened with Kirk Cousins, but then when he was really good was when Kirk had him for the entire offseason. They really got a feel for each other because a tight end is a feel position. It's looking for space, knowing where you're supposed to be. And if you get to those spots and the quarterback works back to you, because Jefferson's going to be 1 or Addison's going to be 1. So you're almost always 2 or 3 if you're the tight end. So he has to work back to you. A lot of times those deep shots were open. And I also think that maybe he just didn't work back in the same like quickness as Kirk Cousins. Cousins got through those reads pretty quickly, sometimes too quickly, and went to the check down and would end up with Hockenson because of that. That's another part of it, is that I think Darnold was willing to hang in longer, which took away some of the TJ Hockenson throws. My expectation is that Hockenson will have a big season with JJ McCarthy. But I mean, anytime somebody doesn't put up huge numbers that they have in the past, there's going to be some questions. I just didn't think that he played badly. I didn't think that Hockenson like dropped the ball or wasn't where he was supposed to be or struggled. It just didn't come to him as often as they were putting up a really, really good offense. And there's so much focus on fantasy numbers and statistics, and like nobody loves stats more than me, but are we talking about like his actual performance? Or are we talking about the fantasy numbers that he put up? Sometimes it feels like that, where it's more of the fantasy numbers that are criticized about TJ Hockenson from last year, because I didn't see that it was any kind of problem. I thought that it just was a guy working his way back in from a very serious injury. So let's see. Bradley says the Browns have 5 backup quarterbacks. I could see us signing one if they are not satisfied with what we have for QB2. Yeah, you're darn right about that. They have all backup quarterbacks. The only one that would be, I don't know. Yeah, because they're probably not going to cut Dylan Gabriel or Shadur Sanders. So there's 2. Kenny Pickett looks like he's their starter. Could they cut Joe Flacco? They could cut Joe Flacco. And in that case, if they don't like Howell, then they could pick up someone like that. And there are going to be options. So, yeah. And, John wanting Joe Flacco. I mean, that's like Joe Flacco, like, look, I mean, last year for Indianapolis, it's not like it was good. 2 years ago, he got a Browns with a great defense, and they kind of play action their way to a playoff game, and then they got destroyed. And it was a nice little story for Joe Flacco. I mean, would I like Flacco a little bit more than Sam Howell? I guess so, like a little bit more. because the history is there with Flacco of success, but how old is he right now? And that's why I'm talking about where almost any quarterback two that you could bring up around the entire league and say, would you rather have Sam Howell or this guy, Sam Howell or that guy? There's not too many of them that you could say where I'd be like, now, wait a minute, let's take that guy. Even with Daniel Jones, the guy's 3-13 in his last 16 starts with more picks than touchdowns. I mean, there's just not a lot of quarterbacks in the league who are you're going to watch in a practice and be super impressed by that kind of thing. And yeah, I know, and I've joked around with Judd about the Sam Howell arm thing. I think that what Sam Howell has is physical traits that are reflective of where he was drafted, and that he, when put into a real situation with a team that was not in good shape, his statistics were reflective of what his team was. And if you're talking about Howell being dropped into this situation, I think he could win some games in this situation because it's way different than what it was in Washington when he started. That doesn't mean I think they would just, be fine with Sam Howell. But I think that also goes for almost any backup. We almost saw Nick Mullins win games. But quarterbacks are just so kind of easy to talk about that even talking about the backup always gets people worked up because everyone's got opinions on quarterbacks. That's why it's hard for me sometimes because I'm like, I just don't have big takes. I just don't have big Sam Howell takes. I've been impressed with Max Brosmer, and I think we all know that if Sam Howell doesn't perform well in camp and in preseason, just like Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion didn't in 2022, that they'll just make a change and they'll find somebody else. And I won't want that player to play either. Right. So, all about champions. Give me Flacco and Jalen Ramsey. I think those are a little different. Let's see. Alex says, what will the narrative of this team be if 4 years KOC still hasn't won a playoff game? Well, I mean, the word narrative always kind of rubs me the wrong way because I don't know what to do with it. Like narrative, is it a narrative of what people will feel about it or what people will be saying about it? I don't really know what to do with that word, but if they don't win playoff games this year, then no one is going to be saying that Kevin O'Connell or Kwesi Adofo-Mensah should be fired or that it was a mistake for hiring them or anything else like that. Because if they're in the playoffs with JJ McCarthy, that means a lot of things went right for JJ McCarthy. But we have arrived at the point where you have to win as a head coach. You don't get 5, 6, 7 years to start winning in the postseason. But you also could compare this to Denny Green. And I know didn't win a Super Bowl, but came really darn close in 1998 and was a great NFL coach. Denny Green didn't win playoff games for a while until he did. And that kind of goes for a lot of different quarterbacks and head coaches. And sometimes, Sean McVay, 2017 was knocked out of the playoffs after he kind of emerged on the scene as this great young coach with this team that he pulled out of nowhere. This year, though, in my opinion, though, yes, they need to win. They need to win playoff games or it's going to be a huge disappointment. We can say in the same breath it's going to be a huge disappointment without saying, well, then KOC can't win in the playoffs ever. But I'm sure that will start. You talk about narratives. Okay, that's how I think of narratives. When I think of that word, I think of unfair, overreactive type of statements that don't really cover anything except for the surface level. The narrative in that way will definitely be that KOC can't win in the playoffs. I don't ever really think that's true about any coach or player. I don't think that there's something in their DNA that they came out of the womb not being able to win in the playoffs. I think a lot of it is matchup based. The Vikings did not play at home after winning 14 games, which is what? That's never happened before. They faced and we went into it saying this is the worst possible team that they could face. And it was. Every other team, if they faced Washington, if they faced Tampa Bay, it would have been, I think, a win for the Vikings. But they faced the one team that had the nastiest D-line other than the Eagles. And then that D-line crushed the Eagles the next week. Sometimes that's just how it goes. Now, the Giants loss is a disaster. To me, last year, they didn't have the horses to beat that team. The Giants loss was a disaster because O'Connell made a huge mistake not moving on from Ed Donatel and keeping the same defense. That's true. But if they don't win a playoff game this year, but this is the hard part. Like, we are so far away from that. This is 6 months away. But if they don't win a playoff game this year, then you are going into the following season, I think, with massive, massive pressure. I think the pressure is already on. And to circle back to where we started, people like Colin Cowherd wanting to talk about this team. Welcome to relevancy, my friends. It's been a while. Welcome back. It's been a while. 2018, is that the last time? 2022, after midway through the season. Last year, after they beat the Falcons. Little sections of time. This whole season, leading up to the season, you're going to have every national reporter out in Minnesota trying to report on what J.J. McCarthy looks like. Yes, right. People can show up to practices and cover them and talk about what they look like, as opposed to just going on scouting reports 2 years old. But anyway, if they don't win in the playoffs, then that pressure that's already here now, that gets turned up big time. And you do start looking at KOC and Kwesi and saying, all right, like, this has to happen. So yeah, I mean, I think that there is a lot of pressure. That's why I don't look at this season like, oh, well, you know, as long as the vibes are good. That was last season for me. I've moved on. The franchise has graduated to, oh no, you're real. You're a real team, and you deserve to be in that spotlight. You deserve to be the team that's having national hosts say idiotic things about you. I mean, this is progress. This is progress, because look at the last few years. What was there to say for those hosts? What moved the needle for those hosts? Now McCarthy does. That means you matter. Bradley says, seems that Darnold was always hesitant to throw the short passes over the middle to Hockenson, so he didn't get a lot of passes. Therefore, McCarthy has a rifle arm for the short passes. Well, I think McCarthy has vision for it. What I see in the difference between them, and this goes to the cheat code conversation as well, is what I see with McCarthy is his vision for the field. The arm talent, I'm surprised we're even talking about it, because I thought we established this last year that he had a good enough arm. But I don't think that Darnold ever had the best vision for things that were in front of him. I think he was good at seeing down the field. I think he was really good at anticipation down the field. But when it came back to like getting back to the underneath stuff, sometimes it just never got back there, and he would just hold, and then try to scramble backwards. Whereas I think McCarthy's going to be much more willing to get rid of that ball and throw it short. Let me take a sip of Diet Dr. Pepper. We got some sponsors to tell you about. And I also have something to give away this evening. So hang on just a second. All right. So let's talk about sponsors first. We'll get back to your questions. So keep loading them up, enjoying the football conversation here. But got to tell you about our friends over at Tempo Meals. Tempo Meals has done wonders for me. I'll tell you the truth. Down a couple of LBs here from not eating as much fast food and eating more on the Tempo Meals side, which is a real victory for me as a constant fast food eater. Tempo Meals, a weekly delivery service that delivers chef-crafted meals from dietitian-approved menu fresh to your door. So you order them online and then they show up. It's kind of amazing. They are fully prepared, can be heated up in the microwave in 3 minutes. Easy, delicious. The Tuscan butter shrimp and barbecue chicken are two of my favorites that I've been ordering. So you might want to check those out. But if you're not a big meat eater, tons of different options for lunches, dinners. So you want to check it out using the promo code Purple Insider. How you do that? Tempo is offering 60% off your first box. So tempomeals.com/Purple Insider is where you can get 60% off that first box. Again, tempomeals.com/Purple Insider. Rules and restrictions apply. Also, guys, you know I wear the hat all the time, and maybe I'm like you, trying to cover up for a little bit of the hair loss there. So I do have something that can help you, though, if you're trying to cover up for the hair loss, and that is called Hims. If you've lost your hair, it doesn't mean you can't get it back. So try Hims Hair Loss Solutions, and you will be joining hundreds of thousands of subscribers who have found their hair again. It makes treating hair loss simple with clinically proven ingredients that can regrow hair in as little to 3 to 6 months. The process simple, 100% online, so there's no uncomfortable doctor visits. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/purple insider. That is HIMS.com/purple insider for your personalized hair loss treatment options today. Okay, so here's what I have. Friend of mine, very good friend, Lindsay Young, wrote a children's book. It is called Olivia the Brave. Maybe you've heard of it. Jim Suhan wrote about it in the newspaper, and I have 2 copies to give away to you guys. I have 3 total. One is for me because Lindsay is a great friend, and this book is really great for kids. I would say probably age maybe 4 to 7 or 8 would probably be in the range. So look, here's what we'll do. If you want one of these 2 copies I'm giving away, shoot me an email with a Vikings question, MatthewColler@gmail. Put it on the screen. Along with there's how you sign up for the newsletter. But there's my email, MatthewColler@gmail. Shoot me a Vikings question and then tell me in the email that you're interested in the book. So you could just tell me like, hey, I'm curious about Josh Metellus' contract and I'm interested in Lindsay's book for your kid. And also, I think after taking a look at it, it would be really good for parents to understand their kids as well. So I got 2 copies to give away. So be the first couple that send me an email there, MatthewColler@gmail, and I will get you one of those. Oh, and then I'll email you back, tell you that you won, and then we'll get an address from you and I'll send it out. So there you go. And I'm proud of her. She's a great friend. She's worked for the Vikings for a long time. So I know how hard it is to write a book also. Okay, let's get in a couple more here and we'll go from there. Dusty says narrative is hard in today's world of sports journalism, has been substituted for hot take artists and debate shows. Yeah, I mean, I think when you look around the NFL, so I go to all these things. I go to the owners' meetings. I go to the combine. I've been to Radio Row at the Super Bowl where all the NFL reporters are. And there are dozens and dozens like myself, Kramer, Gessling, Seifert. Every team has a group, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, of people who are trying to cover the team in the most honest way they can. They're trying to get information for the fans, fun conversations. Sometimes it's getting caught up in the hype or something like that of big moments and being there and telling people what it was like to be inside the Superdome for a playoff win or at the Minneapolis Miracle or something like that, right? And that's what gets us all excited about doing this job. And so we show up every day to these facilities at 32 different places, and we gather information for people like you guys that love every single detail. And it takes a certain type of viewer and listener to want every type of detail. So we're perfect for each other, my audience and me. Like I love diving deep into cap hits and diving deep into who wide receiver 5 is on this franchise. I've always loved that, and you love that, and that's what we do. But when you're on these bigger platforms that are trying to reach millions of people, there's a lot of casual sports fans in the world that they're trying to reach with kind of the simplest form of this conversation. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think when you're talking about the team that I cover and you got details wrong, it's part of my job to also say, hey, JJ McCarthy didn't throw 3 interceptions in 3 practices when there are only 2. And also, how do you know what his arm looks like? Why didn't you ask me? And that's what I think that where it does get lazy in some ways is that there's a lot of people who go on TV and have huge platforms that say things about players and teams without even asking anybody who's there, just because they know it's a hot take or it's going to move the needle or whatever. So it's like, I'm never going to get along really with those people because they do a very different job than me. It's something that doesn't really interest me of being that person that's trying to kind of bring it down to the most possible people. I prefer to be in the mud with you guys looking at every single neck roll that every fullback is wearing. And that's why this works for me. And I'm happy doing this. And I've never wanted to do anything else. Otherwise, I would have quit this a long time ago. So I get it. But those people have the biggest blowhorns. And I do feel like you have some responsibility to at least be accurate and at least be genuine. And that's what's missing sometimes from the conversation. If you're going back to some random person's scouting report on a quarterback from 2 years ago versus all the information about right now and what's happening from people that are there on the ground seeing it, that's not being very genuine, I don't think. Sean says TJ Hockenson missed the first 7 games of the season and took a few games to get up to speed. So over half the season was over. And he continues that comment. Where's the rest of the comment, Sean? Okay, there's the rest of the comment. One of his best attributes is his speed. He's quick off the snap and can separate, giving the QB a target. Yeah, I think quickness, but also intelligence. That's what I think, is that it really understands space. He understands defenses. He sees the game really, really well and can get into spaces where the quarterback is going to be able to find him. But to your point, that's why I'm not really doing much to judge TJ Hawkinson's last season, because I thought he was fine. I also thought that he had to ramp back up after missing a big part of the season, and that is hard to do. Even Dalvin Cook, I mean, not everybody's Adrian Peterson. Dalvin Cook came off of the ACL and had other injuries and struggled in 2018 at times. A lot of players do, coming off ACL injuries. And I didn't think that he struggled, but the burst was not the same. And the conditioning goes on over the entire year. So you're trying to get conditioned up to the point where you can play 60, 70 snaps. I mean, that's hard to do in the middle of the season. So these aren't excuses, because I thought he was okay, but I do think we're going to see the best version of Hockenson this year. Dusty says, y'all see that the Steelers are looking at Jair Alexander. Well, why not? I mean, the Steelers are a team that should be desperately trying to look at everything and anything they can now that they have Aaron Rodgers. Just doesn't feel like, to me right now, that the Vikings are going to do that they're going to do that, or Jalen Ramsey. I think they're going to let it play out, and then they're going to see. And I know this for a fact, an absolute 100% fact, that the Vikings care a lot about the human beings that they bring in to the building. And they know that culture is delicate, and it's only as good as the people you have. KOC can rah-rah all he wants, but if you have one guy that can poison the whole well, then you might not want that guy. And I don't know Alexander or Ramsey, because I haven't covered either one of them, but they both have reputations in that way. And if it's a delicate situation that looks really, really good right now with the team gelling really well, and you bring in somebody that doesn't, it can be problematic. And any of you who have ever had a job would know that. If you got a good media room, or if you have a good, even just section of where you work inside of, I used to work at a grocery store. So I was a cart guy and I was a stock guy, and we would have a crew. And if we hired somebody that didn't fit, I mean, it was a problem. And so even on any level where there are people in an environment, it matters. They care about this, I think, more than almost any other team in the league. They think deeply about, if you're bringing in somebody, make sure it's John Grenard, make sure it's Aaron Jones, like make sure it's guys that have this A+, Blake Cashman, A+ reputation that you're bringing in, and not guys who could upset the apple cart. So they will think about that when it comes to Alexander and Ramsey. I don't feel like it's imminent for either one of those guys to be here. Maybe we'll see if it plays out through the summer. If Ramsey gets cut and not signed right away, or I don't know. Or maybe Stephon Gilmore will be back, or maybe none of them will, because they'll love what it looks like. I think they really want to see it in action, because Blackman was so good for them, or showed a lot of signs of being good for them in 2023. Didn't play a million snaps, but was good when he did. And they love Rodgers. They really, really, really like what they see for Isaiah Rodgers. Byron Murphy, they've spent the money on him to show how they feel about him. Really, for me, is if you take one of those guys, let's say it's Blackman, and you bump him down on the depth chart, and then all of a sudden you're talking about Ramsey and Rodgers along with Murphy. And if someone gets hurt, which they often do, your next man up is really good. Or just even rotate a 30-year-old corner. That's really good. That's how I look at it. Is the upside is that instead of kind of walking this thin line of kind of hoping Jeff Okudah is something, which they've praised and they've liked him, or hoping that Dwight McGlothern is something, Instead, you just have excellence in Jalen Ramsey. Jair Alexander's a little more dicey to me, but so I'll continue to bang the drum for that. I just don't get the feeling that it's something that's going to happen. Alex says, have you been able to glean anything from Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen in camp, or is it fairly hard to judge with no contact? I mean, I know what those guys look like as players because of the sample size they have. I think what we're going to see here is something that I've kind of rolled my eyes about in the past, because every once in a while, someone will say, well, I prefer a 3-4 or a 4-3. And my answer for years was, well, look, I think this started to change about 2016. I was like, what? Base is nickel now. Like, there's three corners all the time. That's a base defense now. There's not the 3-4 anymore. Well, I think there might be. I mean, I honestly think that Allen, Hargrave, and Phillips might be a 3-4 looking defense where you have the two edge rushers kind of hanging over like they do, like Kevin Green and Greg Lloyd or something, or Ricky Jackson back in the day. And then these three guys in the middle for a lot of these downs. And then your two linebackers in the middle. I think they're going to have that in the bag, and otherwise probably rotation. But I mean, you can't tell anything in minicamp because there is no contact, but these guys are really talented players. Like, I haven't even looked for them out there because we're really just watching. I mean, O'Connell has called it a passing camp. It's true. We're just watching JJ McCarthy the whole time, and receivers and corners. And that's really it for minicamp. Brad says, any good news on our backup linebacker, Eric Wilson? The only good news on Eric Wilson is Eric Wilson. Like, he's back. And I think that is a really good sign for the Vikings depth. Last year, the depth was not very good. Kamu Grugier-Hill tried his best and made a couple plays, but was not somebody that he could be out on the field for very long without getting exposed, and he did, and that's why he ended up not playing a whole heck of a lot. Eric Wilson can play every down if you need him. And the other thing is, too, and this is like a classic football thing, but the other day, Eric Wilson is last guy off the field and is working with young players, trying to help them with some special team stuff. Like, he is, I think, a person that a lot of people really like in this organization from when he was here before. He is going to do anything that it takes for them. And I think they could even have sort of a mix and match type of role for him where he rotates in a little bit. I think that's what he could do. So I'm big on that signing. I am big on that signing. Plus, you know that Pace and Cashman will get banged up at times. Alex says, when are the podcasts on the porch coming? When the weather gets nice, man. What the heck? I have been so disappointed with this lack of summer recently, but the porch podcasts are coming. We've already got Dane, Will, and Dave Campbell from the Associated Press are all already in. I've asked all of them, porch pod, because this is the porch pod time of year. And we'll get Ben Gessling over too. That's what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for 4 porch podcasts by the time we get to training camp. Dusty says, missed the beginning of this. I assume Metellus comments were touched on. Talk about high character, even in a contract situation. No wonder he's a captain. Well, first of all, Dusty, let's not be missing any other minutes of the show. Okay. No, I'm kidding. But, well, that's part of the reason that I think Metellus will get this worked out and it'll be fine. Because it's going to take a little work and it's going to take some effort, but he is a really important part of this locker room. We're talking about how delicate it is. He's a major, major part of it, a captain, a dynamic player, somebody that everybody rallies around, but he's also really, really smart. And that's what I have to give credit. And it shouldn't be surprising. You know, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is the guy who went to Princeton and did he go to Stanford or something too? I don't know. But like the Ivy League guy looking for intelligent players, and KOC, who his dad's background is in something like the FBI or whatever. They, I think, have, and Brian Flores is a really, really super sharp guy. I think they have a great idea of who to latch onto that has the intelligence. And even if there's physical traits that aren't perfect or something, guys can elevate past that with toughness and intelligence. And you can always say you want intelligent players. Like, no person's ever going to be like, you know what I want? Really dummies, clueless fools. That's what I really want. but instead, I think it's really about, can you actually identify them? Can you actually identify who is the intelligent players and which type of IQ is applicable? Josh Metellus is a great example of, he's really smart in real life, but he's also really smart in football as well. And he's crazy enough to be able to play linebacker at 205 or 210 pounds. He's a rare person that you run into in this league. There's just not a lot of Josh Metelluses, so they're not going to let him go. Hydratic. Is that a metal band name? Sounds cool. Any chance to see Ingram Dawkins? I know Coleman is high on Brett Coleman. Yeah. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, not actually in a way that I could tell if he's good at football or not. But what I can tell you is that he's out there and he's mixing in quite a bit when the first team is playing on offense and they're mixing and matching, which just tells me that he must be doing something behind the scenes to earn that. That he's not earning it by wrecking people or something in practice, but from in the meetings, is he getting it? Is he coming along? Like, that's the type of stuff they can really figure out. And then they're looking for micro technical stuff. Like, is somebody playing something the right way in a walkthrough? But in the walkthrough, they start out and they kind of like do a little bit, and you can get a sense for, okay, are you in the right spot in this walkthrough? Are you in the right spot in this 7-on-7? Are you doing this drill properly? Because this sport is so detailed that if you go left when the play is right, you might give up a 50-yard touchdown. So you got to know everything. You got to know all the details, and almost nobody is freakish enough not to. So that's another player. I mean, we spent a couple minutes talking to Ingram Dawkins. You're like, they did it again. They found another really smart guy. So we'll see how he develops from there. Wicked Storm about to hit Bloomington. Well, that's kind of close to me. I don't want that. Why? What is the deal? It has been like just sort of a, like, spring just won't let go. Very irritating. As a golfer, am I right? Very annoying. Sean says, I wonder if they are more willing to ride with the cornerback room for now, maybe make a trade later or deadline edition. Yeah, I think that's right. For now, they're going to let this play out and then decide. And that's okay. They can do that. I would prefer, when you get a chance to get a Jalen Ramsey, that you get him. Because when the Rams were pushing the gas pedal down, and I know they were more like an all-in 1 year as opposed to 2 or 3, but Ramsey is under contract for a couple of seasons. But they went out and got Jalen Ramsey, and they went out and got Von Miller, and sometimes you just have to do those things. And I know that then later on you might go, oh, we could have used that whatever draft pick, or, oh, this cap space is problematic or something. But with someone that good, and with a defense this talented and an offense this talented and coaching this good, to me, the juice is worth the squeeze to add one more guy. Somebody was asking me in the Friday mailbag at purpleinsider.football, they were asking me about, like, if I would change the win total, because I mentioned the other day that I'm changing my wins for the Vikings, and we're going to do this on the porch at some point. We're going to pick every game again after minicamp and before camp from 10 to 11. I've got them as an 11-win football team right now, after I've seen McCarthy look good and competent and strong and all that and healthy. And they said, well, would you move it up to 12 if they got Ramsey? My answer is no, but my confidence in my pick would be higher. My confidence in 11 games right now is, call it like 60% confident. I'm like, I think that's probably what they can do. If they got Ramsey, I'd go up to like 75 confidence, because one of my concerns is just, what's this secondary really going to look like when it gets out there? And they play so many good receivers. They play so many good quarterbacks that if there's a single weakness, it's going to be an issue. So I would be more confident. I still think that Blackman and Rodgers and Murphy can be good, and they could be better than what they were last year with Griffin and Gilmore. It's just, Ramsey's the type of guy that makes that very solid, very predictable. He's been on the field every year. He's put up great numbers every year. Like, that's somebody that you know what you're going to get from. Sean says, when does our shared practices happen? That's what I'm looking forward to. See how our O-line holds up, DTs looking corners. So one of them is locked in and is official, and that's with the Patriots. And that's right before the game where they play the Patriots in the preseason. The Rams talked about it and had mentioned it at the owners' meetings, I think publicly, that they wanted a joint practice with the Vikings. I have not seen an announcement about that yet, but I'm thinking that they want to have 2 joint practices this year. And you're right. That's what's really going to tell a lot of stories. That's going to tell a story about the corners. That's going to tell a story about the interior D line, because those go hard. Those are very serious. And last year it didn't tell the whole story because the offense struggled against the Browns defense. At the end of the day, the Browns didn't have a special defense and the Vikings had an awesome offense. So, at the end of the day, but the issue was still offensive line and interior line, and they created pressure, and Darnold under pressure eventually kind of snapped in some of those practices. But we did learn last year in the joint practices how good the Vikings defense was going to be. So we do learn a lot from those. I'm curious. I'm going to have my friend Chad Graff, who covers the Patriots, come on the show soon, and we'll do like Drake May versus JJ McCarthy and that kind of thing. Seldom Seen says, are we worried all about the run defense taking a step back with all this new pass rush? Bullard's gone. Yeah, I think so. I am. I think that they have really good tacklers behind the D-line, so that helps. Cashman, Ivan Pace is an elite run defender. Among safeties, if you call him that, Josh Metellus is an elite run defender. Harrison Smith can still do the job. I think Rodgers is actually, for a guy who's not that huge, has been good as a tackler. Blackman, when he was coming out, it was a main thing for them that they loved his tackling. So they have a lot behind it, and Harrison Phillips can still do the job. But I do think that it is a bit of a concern that that's not going to be the same as it was last year. If you're asking me about give and take, though, I would take a little bit back against the run to get a lot more against the pass. But is it a concern? I think so. When you talk about the teams that they're going to play, Ben Johnson's offense right off the bat, and then Atlanta can run the ball extremely well. They have a good run blocking offensive line. They have a good running system, Bijan Robinson. So you get a couple of guys right off the bat, and then you got to play Detroit, Philadelphia, Washington with the running quarterback. So it's something that is going to be really hard to figure out in training camp or something like that, because the handoffs in training camp, they take the first couple steps, nobody hits them, and they move on. That we're going to have to basically find out in the season. If they don't like what they have behind this group to rotate in, then I don't know, maybe Jonathan Bullard ends up coming back. We've seen stuff like that happen in the past. So there you have it, folks. The entire full, complete breakdown of minicamp. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. We had a lot of good conversations. And if you missed any of those podcasts from TCO Performance Center with Dane Mizutani or with Alec Lewis, make sure you go check those out as well. Those are fun, in-depth conversations about what McCarthy looked like and a lot of other subjects. So, but you guys are great. And we're going to continue to do Monday and Thursday live shows. And I'm open for ideas for whatever else you guys are thinking for the next few weeks. I think there's a lot of opportunity to have some fun, to have some themes. I was thinking about breaking down the divisions that the Vikings are going to be playing, like going in depth in the NFC East, like getting a lot of stats, off-season moves, matchups, even stuff like that. We're always into doing a little history stuff on this show. So we can have some fun getting ready. And then we'll do hardcore position by position camp previews, what we're looking for, all that sort of stuff. It's a long time. It feels like until camp, and yet it's also right around the corner. But I know you guys will be here because it seems like Vikings fans are super pumped for the season. So I will be here for you as well. And if there's any breaking news, this is where I'll be. So thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you check out the newsletter. Got some really cool stuff coming over the next couple of days and next week. purpleinsider.football. And make sure you like and subscribe. Just went over 12,500 subscribers, which is I'm really, really happy about, and feel so blessed to have you guys as the Purple Insider community. So thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to y'all very soon. Football.